artists, we're going to do some perspective practice today, and all you need is a piece of white paper. A smooth white paper is best, and if you have a paper that's a little bit thicker than a printer paper, that is ideal because you will be doing quite a bit of erasing. You're going to need a pencil. An eraser on top of your pencil will work just fine, but if you do have a separate eraser, that is ideal, but you don't have to have a separate eraser. And then, of course, you're going to want to have a ruler. Now, if you don't have a ruler, any kind of straight edge would work. If you have a paint stirring stick, that actually usually has a great straight edge, or even the edge of a notebook would work just fine. Now, I wanted to have this in here because I know that a lot of my students really love lettering and bubble lettering, and these are just some of my practices that I've done. My perspective in these is a little bit all over the place. In fact, I'm just kind of winging my perspective in these, but once you get comfortable with perspective, there's so much you can actually do with lettering too. And we are actually going to practice one bubble letter today as well. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to find the middle-ish area of my paper, and I want to be in the top half of my paper, so somewhere around this area. It does not need to be perfect or exact. I'm going to put a little dot, and this is going to be my vanishing point. Now, when you're doing one-point perspective, as we are doing today, you always want to have that one vanishing point. Now, sometimes in some projects you might have a visible horizon line, and today we are going to go ahead and have a visible horizon line. So all I'm going to do is take my ruler, my straight edge, line it up with that vanishing point, and I'm going to do a line straight across. Now, before you do that, I've done my line a lot darker than I want you to do yours. And the reason I'm doing mine darker is so you can see it clearly on the video. But you want to do this pretty lightly because you're going to be doing a lot of erasing. We're even going to be erasing out a horizon line in parts in a little bit. Now, I'm going to hop over to the right side of my paper. If you want to use your ruler or straight edge to get a perfect rectangle, that is fine, but I'm just going to hand draw mine. I'm not worried about it being perfect. Now notice my vertical rectangle right here, I've got some of it above the horizon line and some of it below the horizon line. Now we're going to go ahead and start our perspective lines. So what I'm doing is I'm taking my ruler or my straight edge and I'm going to line it up as perfectly as I can with each corner of that rectangle going back to that vanishing point. And I'm just drawing that line, and again, I'm drawing mine darker than I want you to draw yours so you can erase this out easily. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing with each and every corner, lining up that ruler with the corner and having that line go all the way back to that vanishing point exactly. I'm even going to go ahead and do that with these corners right here. See, I wasn't holding my ruler tight right there, so I had a little bit of a slip. So let that serve as a good lesson to hold that ruler down tightly when you're doing your perspective line. Now this almost looks like a hologram coming out at us, but you can see that it's pretty obvious that this rectangular part right here looks like it's bigger and closer to us, and then it looks like there's parts of this that are fading back and getting smaller and smaller or further and further away. Now I'm going to go directly below my vanishing point right here and take my pencil and create a nice wide rectangle. I'm going to do the same thing with this rectangle down here that I did with my rectangle on the side, with taking each corner and lining it up with that vanishing point as exact as possible. Now one thing to think about with the vanishing point and with the horizon line, objects below our vanishing point and below our horizon line are going to seem like we are looking down at them. And so you can see now that we have done those perspective lines going back, it does kind of look like we are looking down at this rectangle or this little hologram coming out at us right here. Now I'm going to go over here for our first bubble letter. And if you already know how to do a bubble letter, that's great. But you might want to go ahead and watch me. I'm going to start off my bubble letter by just making a basic capital letter. So I'm just doing it with my lines, or think of it like a little stick drawing. So we're doing the capital letter F, and you can see that my middle line right here is kind of close to that horizon line. Now in order to turn this into a bubble letter, I am just going to draw my lines around my little stick letter F. So you can see I'm just going all the way around it, easy peasy. Again, the only reason I did that little stick F in the middle is if you're not comfortable with bubble letters yet, I find that's an easy way to do the bubble letters, is to start with that little stick first. Now I'm going to take my eraser and I'm going to erase out the lines in the middle, And while I'm at it, I can just go ahead and erase out my horizon line in here anyways, because I don't want a horizon line going straight through my object or my letter. In other words, I want this bubble letter to appear to be a solid. Once again, I'm going to take my straight edge or my ruler and I'm going to line it up with the corners and go straight back to that vanishing point. Now this time, I am actually not going to bother doing my perspective lines from the corners that would go straight through my F anyways. I'm just going to leave those alone. And if that doesn't make sense, don't worry about it. Just kind of follow along with what I'm doing and then hopefully it'll all kind of come together. So same thing with this little corner right here. If I were to line that up with my vanishing point, that corner, I'd be drawing a line through my letter. And so I'm just not going to do that because I'm going to have to erase that out anyways. Now this corner is close to that vanishing point and that line would not go through any letter, so I'm going to go ahead and do my perspective line back to that vanishing point right here. And same thing with this corner right here. Now what about this corner? So this corner is the one I'm talking about. If I line up that ruler with that vanishing point, that line is going to go through that letter and ooh, I don't want that to happen. So I'm just going to skip over that one. Now this one, that corner does work because when I draw my perspective line, it doesn't go through a letter. Same thing with these last two corners right here. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn this from what looks like a kind of like a hologram coming up into a solid block cube letter. So I'm going to choose my thickness. Where I start my line going up right here is going to kind of be how thick that letter is. So I'm going to go about right here and I'm going to do this line parallel to the edge of that letter. So when you're blocking a letter out for right now, you want to go parallel to the edge of that letter that you're closest to. Now, of course, when my line hits that letter, I'm going to stop because I don't want to draw a line through that letter because I want it to be solid and clean. So I'm going to skip right over here and I'm looking at my thickness right here and want this to be about the same, and I'm going to draw a line up, up, and up. Now normally I say when you hit a perspective line, when you're blocking out your letters, then stop. But this is actually my horizon line going through here, so I'm just going to go straight over that. But I am going to stop right when I get to this perspective line. Now, since I'm at the edge of that perspective line and the edge of the letter right here, at least this part of the letter, I'm going to hop over here and I'm going to start this line about the same thickness right here. I'm going to go up, up, and up. Now, I'm going to stop when I hit that perspective line, like I said, and I'm going to change directions. So now this little line right here is parallel to the F right here. And when I switch directions, I need to make this line parallel to this little wide horizontal part of the F right here. Again, if this doesn't make sense, don't stress out about it. Just follow along with me and hopefully it'll kind of come together soon. So I'm going to draw a line out, out, out. And then my line is going to run into that perspective line right here. So I'm going to stop and I'm going to change the direction. And then this line right here has to be parallel with the edge of the F right there. I'm going to go up. Let me go ahead and erase out my perspective lines and hopefully this will make it even more clear. So I'm erasing out all my perspective lines going back, but I am not going to be erasing out my horizon line. And if I erase too much, it's so easy to go back in and just add any lines back in that I need to. Now the one place I am going to erase my horizon line is where it's going through that letter. So even though this is the side part of the letter, it's kind of going back, it's still part of the letter and I want it to appear to be a solid. Now this is just a fun challenge that is totally optional. You might want to watch me all the way through and decide if you want to do this. So I am going to start off with my ruler, my straight edge, going back to that vanishing point, and I'm going to add some little value lines or some little hatch lines almost going on the side of that F, but I'm doing them along with that perspective. So every time I add a line, I'm inching that ruler up just a tiny bit. Now I'm not doing exact measurements because it doesn't need to be perfect, but you can see I'm starting to get that value in. And look, this edge is getting a little messy. Don't worry about that. We'll clean it up in a minute. Now I've gone over my edges a little bit in some places, so I'm gonna just clean that up with my eraser. And of course, if you do this, I do think it looks nice to kind of go back in and just go over the sides and the corners of your letter once more. Now I'm going to go up here, kind of up above that F, but still to the left of that vanishing point, and I'm going to draw a circle. It does not need to be perfect. Now we're going to use our circle to kind of start to practice with curved shapes. So in order to do our perspective lines on the circle, we are going to find the widest point, or not really a point, but the widest edge on that circle as it relates to the vanishing point. So I'm lining up that ruler, that straight edge, with that widest part straight back to that vanishing point and doing a little perspective line. I'm going to do this same thing right here. I'm going to find that widest part, line it up with that vanishing point. Now right here almost looks like an ice cream cone, or it might look like the little Batman sign kind of going up in the sky. I'm going to turn this into a solid though. And to turn this into a solid, it's going to be like a cylinder, or think of it like a soup can or maybe a soda can. So I am going to do a line that parallels the edge of my shape right here. So it's going to be a little curved shape. Then I'm going to erase the rest of my perspective lines going back to that vanishing point. And I want this part to be a little bit more curved, so I'm going to kind of alter that a little bit right there. So now you can see that looks very much like a cylinder. Now you can do any number of things with it. You can just leave it alone right here, but if you want, you could turn this into a little Coke can with me, or a Pepsi can if that's your thing. I'm going to start off with a little oval up here. And in the top part of that kind of tall oval, I'm going to put a wider oval. Then I'm going to draw a little line that looks like a little upside down U. And then I'm going to close that little shape up with a slightly curved line right there. I'm going to put a teeny tiny little circle, kind of like a little bolt. And then I'm going to draw the mouth of the can right here. So I'm going to draw kind of a circle-ish type shape. And I'm going to get that line that kind of goes around. It looks like a closed can. If you want it to look like it's an open can, just fill in right here. Now, if you want to get crazy, you could do a label on the side of your can if you would like. Just remember, any vertical lines on that will actually go along with perspective lines going back to that vanishing point. Now over here, I'm just going to turn my little holograms into solids. So I'm going to do a parallel line to the edge of that rectangle right here. And of course you could use your ruler. Now you can imagine if this was a skyscraper or maybe a train going back, we could leave it all as one piece and then do a series of vertical lines going back and back and back. And then technically, as you go back and back and back, if you were doing that, you would have your vertical lines get closer and closer together. And then as those lines receded, those lines would technically get shorter and shorter because they stay within those little perspective lines. You can see how that looks like it's really receding right there. But either way, I'm just going to focus on our solid little block right here. So I'm going to erase out my horizon line and my perspective lines inside the object that I want to be solid. And so again, you could have a lot of fun playing with this type of thing, but I want to just focus on that block, so I'm going to erase this out. Since I erased out too much, I'm going to just add that line back in. And I'm even going to add back in my horizon line up until my solid block. Now I'm going to have some fun with this one. I'm going to turn this into a solid block that kind of looks actually half like a cinder block. So I'm going to do a line that's parallel to the edge of my rectangle right here. It's not perfectly straight, that's okay. You don't want to make it too thick. Now that I've done that, I'm going to erase out my perspective lines within my cube, because again, I want this to appear to be a solid. Now, on the bigger side, so the side that looks like it's facing me, I'm going to go ahead and do a rectangle again. This almost looks like a window or an opening. Now, this time, I'm going to get out my ruler, my straight edge. I'm going to line up this bottom corner with that vanishing point, and I'm going to draw that perspective line. But I'm going to stop once I hit the top of that rectangle right here, because I don't want this line to go straight through my object. I'm going to do the same thing right here. I'm going to line up my straight edge with that corner, and I'm going to do a line, and I'm going to stop once it hits that top of that rectangle and does not go through my larger object. Now you can almost see that this almost starts to look like maybe a hollow window that we're seeing through. In order to really take this up a notch, I'm going to add a little bit more down here. So I'm going to add a horizontal line that is parallel with the bottom edge of my rectangle. So I'm going to cross, across, across. Now when I hit that perspective line, I've got to change direction. Think about what we did up in our capital letter F over here. So I'm going to change direction, and this little line, even though it's super small, is going to be parallel with the edge right here. So up like that. Boop. And then same thing over here. This line right here up against that perspective line is going to have to change direction and go vertical. Just a tiny little detail, but I'm still going to erase out what's left of my perspective lines in there. Clean that up a little bit. I had this top line so jiggity jaggedy, I just want to kind of draw a little bit straighter, and I might even while I'm at it take it down just a little bit so this top doesn't look quite so thick. Now I think it looks really cool if you add some value in here. It looks extra cool if you make the sides a little bit darker value than the bottom. You can get out your best blending tool, which is your finger, and just kind of run over that just a little bit. And of course, I'm going to erase out my perspective lines going back. Now we're going to do just an extra little bonus challenge. So you can watch this all the way through, you can enjoy watching it, or you can try it along with us as well. So watch closely. Think about the letter S kind of laying on its side, but we're going to make it extra fancy, which means we're going to add some extra little swirly cues on it. And I'm going to do that to both sides of the S. So notice I've got my S positioned so it's kind of wide in comparison with that vanishing point. So this is something that you can apply if you do curved letters, and it's also kind of drawing on something that we did in the cylinder right here with working with the curved shapes. So I'm going to find the widest part of my curved shapes, and at the edge of the widest part of each little curve, I'm going to do a perspective line back down to that vanishing point. So the widest part of this curve right here is right about here, and I'm going back to that vanishing point. So I'm going to do the same thing right here. The widest part of this curve is right here. So I'm going to line that ruler up, and I'm going to take perspective line all the way down to that vanishing point. Now I'm going to take that ruler again on the edge right here, the widest part, and take it back and stop when I get to that line right there. Now here on the end of my little fancy S line, I'm also going to do a perspective line that would be going back to that vanishing point, except I am going to stop right when I get to the edge of that letter. So you can see this almost starts to look like a little bit of a scroll. I'm going to do the same thing over here, finding the widest part of that curve, going back to that vanishing point. I'm going to go up here, widest part of that curve, going back to my vanishing point, boop, widest part of that curve, going back to the vanishing point. And then of course we've got this little edge right here, the end of that little fancy S line. I'm going to do the ruler back to that vanishing point right there, and that's it. Now this looks pretty cool just like that, so you might just want to leave it like that. But if you're thinking, man, I just actually like to turn that into what looks like a scrolled single piece of paper, let's do it. So I'm going to look up here. I'm in between these two perspective lines, and so I have to look up at that object. And so I'm going to draw a curved line that is parallel with my object right here. So this line is parallel to that edge. Now I'm going to skip up some space right here, and once again I'm going to draw a curved line that is parallel to this edge. So this part, if you're drawing, you might want to draw really, really light because you might need to erase and adjust. Now I'm going to get my eraser out and erase my perspective lines. Now if you're looking at this thing and, oh, I really wish I could add some value to it, a good place to start with adding value is maybe darkening in right around the edges or your lines. And maybe I'll get a little value down here at the bottom. And of course you can get out your best available blending tool, which is your finger. If you'd like to kind of smooth some of that out, you can. And of course, if you gray out the whole thing too much, you can get out your best available highlighting tool, which is your eraser. Now keep in mind what we just did was a little introductory practice with 1-point perspective. There's also 2-point perspective that you can get into, even 3-point perspective that you can get into. And of course we didn't do a whole finished project as far as having a little town going back or skyscrapers going back or little country road going back. A lot of the traditional projects that you might see with 1-point perspective, railroads as well. So you can use what we've learned here and kind of go in that direction, or you do not have to take this anywhere else and do anything else with it. And hopefully you had fun with this little 1-point perspective intro. Thanks for watching, guys.